just going to... Yeah. We're riding, so we're on to stage 3 of our day 2 Thailand ride today. So we're still riding down towards Prachuap Khiri, and we're still riding along the coast. It's beautiful coastal weather, a little bit cloudy and eerie when Chris and Gay were doing the filming for this day. We do get some rainy days on the bike, but yeah, it's usually a lovely warm day, and a little bit of rain's okay. So we will get started. Just going to cut down the tunes here and let's go. So today we're joined by, so we've got our Friday funny session, and today we're joined by Pete and our very good friend at hands, Vince. Hey Vince, how are you?
Hello, riders. I'm virtually riding. I'm not doing anything. I am.
We were kind of hoping you'd be on your stationary bike, Vince.
I'm burning 0 calories as we speak. In fact, I might even eat something while we do this, going in the other direction. But I'm fully supportive, of course.
Amazing. Well, it's awesome to have you. And for those that don't know, and so Vince is one of Australia's most successful and popular comedians. We've had the pleasure of working with Vince on a number of our events, and you would have seen his face, heard his voice around through many different TV shows and radios and stand-up. So I'm going to let Pete chat to you today and just pull out that story, that wonderful story of yours, Vince. So I'm just going to hand it straight over to Pete.
Thank you. Can you just turn up the volume?
Sure can.
Thank you. Hey Vince, how's things? Where are you this afternoon?
Mate, I am at home in my little nook of an office here. I'm looking out at a beautiful day. I've got glimpses is enough in Sydney, of Sydney Harbour. As long as you've got a glimpse, yeah, you're good. So
Yeah.
I've got, you can probably hear a lawnmower and a leaf blower thrashing around in the background there. So yeah, I'm at home, home alone, as a matter of fact.
This is our second spin class for this morning, or Zoom room for today, Vince. And when we walked out this morning to start the first one, I'm informed it was minus 3.8 degrees up here at the farm. So it was a chilly start to the day.
That just makes my bum cold thinking about it. I get a cold now. As you get older, your bum gets colder. Is that just me? I don't know.
I don't know. I was cold everywhere this morning. So Vince, we worked together a number of times, but the most memorable time for me was that first occasion. It was April of 2015, and we're in Barcelona. And we were working with a client over there, and it was a magnificent venue in which you entertained the audience and held them in the palm of your hand through dinner. Do you recall that night at all?
Mate, I remember that gig like it was just. I took my whole family to that gig. It was at the W Hotel in Barcelona, which is just down near Barceloneta in Barcelona. And this building it's an architectural copy of the Burj Al Arab in Dubai. I don't know why the architect hasn't been sued, because it's almost a direct rip-off. A great venue, and it was spring, from European spring, so it was starting to warm up. I remember seeing, you were very impressive. We had some great speakers. We had Australia's digital cop was there. We had who's that motorbike rider that lived?
Wayne Gardner.
Yes. Yeah. We had the head of MI6, the character that Miss Moneypenny was based on in the Bond movies. So and you could a great array of interesting speakers, and for an insurance conference. So
it was a wonderful conference. You said something there that my ears pricked up, Vince, and you said about the building that it was a rip-off.
Yes.
And I wonder if you've had any personal experience with rip-offs of late.
People ripping off my material or having my jokes ripped off. It's quite common in my biz, mate. I try not to watch too many other comics because you get too.
How about something a bit more personal about jackets, leather jackets?
Oh, no. Yes, well, the big news in Sydney has been the arrest of this guy who's been ripping people off and going back about 18 months now, and with leather jackets. And he got me as well. In fact, I was on the Ben Ford and 2GB morning show this morning because people were ringing in saying, oh, yes, I was ripped off. And I was ripped off. And it was in December 2018. I was going for a little power walk around Rose Bay, not far from here. And this guy pulled over and stuck his head out the window and he said, in a very heavy Italian accent, he said, can you tell me which way to the airport? So I gave him some directions and noticed he was Italian. I told him I was Italian too. So we actually spoke in Italian. And he was telling me that he just finished this fashion parade and he worked for Versace and he had all these samples. And he gave me this leather jacket as a gift for giving him directions.
Wow.
And then he said, oh, well, would you like one for your wife too and your kids? And he opened up his boot. It was like leather jackets in there, all really nice. And I smelt a scam, but the stuff was quite high quality too. So I thought, oh. And then he said, oh, look, could you give me a few bucks for it? You know, I can't really take it back to Italy. I'll have to leave it here. It's a waste and I'll have to pay duty on it if I take it home and blah, blah. And I ended up losing $800. But I don't feel like I was ripped off. I've got these quite nice jackets and I'm still wearing them. But it's been a big story. The guy's been arrested now, so the scam is dead.
And something that your mum and dad would be proud of. You bought 4 jackets, you paid $800, and you're now selling them online for $350 each.
Yeah, slightly used and might not be real.
So Vince, you grew up in Punchbowl.
Yes.
And
not the world, but you can see
it's a
it.
very different place than what it is now. Back in the 60s, my grandparents actually lived in Punchbowl. What was it like for you growing up and going to school in Punchbowl?
Oh, mate, you know what? There's a great old saying, you don't know how poor you are. But, you know, we were kind of poor and working class, but we loved it. Punchbowl was a fantastic place to grow up. It was real sort of migrant, New Horizon Australia, a lot of new homes being built. I mean, I'm talking about the early 60s here, and just after I was born, the family moved out there. I thought it was a fantastic place. We had so many nationalities in my street with the weirdest names. I mean, some of the names, I mean, I'll put them into my routine. We had a guy living next to me, a Chinese family, and for years, I thought his name was Lopak. Everyone called him Lopak. The teachers at school called him Lopak. You know, we'd always say, oh, have you seen Lopak? Or where's Lopak? Even like into his 30s. You know, we were I caught up with Lopak the other day. You know, his name was Robert. And his mother would stand at the balcony each day and call him, Lopak! Lopak! But he never even told anyone that his name was Robert. He just went along with it. Yeah, I'm Lopak. Oh, we had Greeks. We had a guy on the other side of our house, and his name was Vladimir Sislak, and he became Chisel Dick. Chisel Dick was everyone called. No one could pronounce Chiselak because it had about 3 Z's in it. So he was Chisel Dick. Wally Chisel Dick. That's the Aussie way.
Yeah, we've got a way of.
Like Punchbowl is in the Bankstown area, and you know Bankstown was my world. But I was 18 before I went across Sydney Harbour Bridge, before I went to the eastern suburbs, before I went to the, you know, to the northern beaches. When I got to uni and started meeting all these different kinds, I never met a Jewish person until I was 18. I mean, Sydney's a very segregated place. I mean, even to this day, you either live in the east, the north, the inner west, the western suburbs, the northern beaches, the southern beaches, and never do these zones cross over. Even people you sort of hung out with or dated when I was single all lived within your area. It's quite strange. Sydney's like a collision of villages trying to be a city.
Yeah. And you said that a lot of this, when you went to uni, that you started to see it was beyond the microcosm that is Punchbowl. And for many, they wouldn't know that you studied 6 years at uni in architecture.
Yes.
And but that was a passion from early childhood, or when did that love of architecture come?
Look, to be honest, there were several other reasons why I studied it as well. A lot of showbiz.
What was the name?
A lot of showbiz people come out of architecture. Architecture is one of those things that people do when they don't know what they want to do. I mean, I always had a great interest in it, and it was kind of a natural sort of wog kid thing to do. Like, you know, if your dad's a concreter or in the building industry, then the next step up in generation is to be the architect, the guy that wears the white.
Right.
So, and I did have an interest in it, obviously, but architecture reviews, particularly at Sydney Uni, where I studied, had a great reputation for producing entertainers. And, you know, a lot of the comics that I loved growing up came out of the English review system, the Cambridge reviews, I mean, the Python people, the Goodies, all those sort of people. And there were some fantastic Aussie, I mean, Auntie Jack and Norman Gunston and all those people all came out of many other names too, writers and producers, directors, Peter Weir, John Dugan, all these people came out of architecture reviews. The architecture review was this really rich, creative environment. It was just exciting to be around these fantastic people, creative people who are channeling their energies into showbiz. Architecture is one of the only things you can do at uni that is creative, you know, unless, apart from sort of fine art or creative writing. And when you think about all the professions, you think about going in there, learning a dogma, learning all about the law, or learning all about medicine, or learning all about, you know, accounting, or learning all about dentistry and hanging up your shingle. But architecture really is about the creative process. And it's a process that's even helps me to this day, that the whole design process, the synthesizing of information and squirting it out into another shape, that's comedy writing as well. It's a fantastic thing to study, architecture. It's a crap thing to be an architect, I might say, because it's not a very highly regarded profession these days. I mean, everyone wants to have an argument with the architect. Oh, mate, that shouldn't be like that. Oh, no, it should be like this. Oh, no, you know what you're talking about. Even the bricklayer will argue with the architect. You wouldn't argue with the doctor. The doctor says you've got to get your kidney taken out. Oh, okay, I'll get the kidney taken out. So architect, no respect.
No respect. And so you maybe you were ahead of your time and you saw that coming. So you packed up and headed across and lived and worked in New York.
I did, yeah. Look, I started doing comedy when the Comedy Store opened. Look, we'd just done our third or fourth review. I was between year 3 and year 4. So I'd already been working as a comic for a couple of years, and graduated from architecture, headed off to New York. That was in the late 80s. Got a gig on MTV, which was astonishing. It was in the right place at the right time. I'd been in New York for about 6 weeks. I was working in a few of the clubs, bumped into this MTV producer at an off-Broadway show, and he recognised me from a video that my manager had sent out ages ago and ended up on someone's dust heap. But he said, "Hey, you're that guy from Australia," and he invited me in. There was this great job going for this to host this MTV live chat show, and every comic in New York had been for this part. And I did the audition the next day, got a phone call that night. I got the job. I was just absolutely beside myself. It was just every comic in New York hated me. I mean,
yeah, right.
He was this guy who just got to town. I mean, seriously, to the point where they wouldn't even let me work in their clubs anymore. No, you out.
Yeah, right.
But it was a fantastic show. It only lasted a few months, I hasten to add, but I was live across America 4 nights a week on the Big Blank Show, it was called.
Yeah, right. And how long did you live in New York for?
I spent most of that year in New York. God, I loved it. Look, it really shaped my life that year. When I came back to Australia, and I really designed my life around that whole sort of New York urban fabric. I lived in a great apartment on Oxford Street in Sydney. So there was people outside my door from, at a 24 hours. There was more people on Oxford Street at 3 in the morning than 3 in the afternoon. It was such and I lived there for most of my adult life, actually, for about 16 years. It was just wonderful. I loved it.
So the events occurring in the US and in particular in New York now, as someone that lived there for 12 months and it had, as in your words, such a big impact upon you, how do you feel what you're seeing coming out of the US and New York?
Yeah, look, very distressing from a number of points of view. First of all, let me just say that racism is omnipresent in the United States. And no matter where you go, no matter who you talk to, no matter what walk of life you're in, racism is a very big deal. It's usually kept just under the surface, but there are times, and there's been several times in my life where I've seen that break through, and the schisms are deep, painful, and long-lasting. I mean, the last big one I can remember was the Rodney King riots of 1992. But no matter how far you go back, you will find these breakouts occurring, from time to time. And this is a bad one that we've got now. What I find particularly distressing about the current one is that the world is in a lot of pain at the moment. Apart from the fact that we're in a worldwide pandemic, we've got a resurgent China. We've got the US pulling out of Hong Kong. We've got a recession heading towards a depression. 40 million people unemployed in the US alone. It's a time when the world, particularly Australia, turns our gaze towards the US for solace, for leadership, for security. And we look at the US and we just see looting and riots and violence and unease and, anger at the leadership. So many problems. I mean, you're thinking, hang on, we need you people to be leading the way right now. That's what I find really disturbing about switching the TV on and watching all that at the moment.
And is it something that when your mum and dad came out from Italy, is it something that they faced and I assume you faced at school in those early years?
Yeah, look, I tend to gloss over that a bit, but it was there. It really was. I mean, Australia is a far more tolerant. I hate that word, tolerant. I mean, like you say you tolerate something, it's like you tolerate something that you hate, but you'll just put up with. Like I've got a boil on my ass, which I'll tolerate. But I hate the word, but it's the accepted word. Tolerance wasn't really around then. Political correctness wasn't around then. You said what you like, and you let fairly primal feelings straight into the air. So there was a fair degree of feeling. Growing up in the playground, and I'm sure my parents would have experienced it even more so, a decade and a half before me. But things are definitely different now. I think we treat our new arrivals very well in this country. Political correctness it had a fair way to come. I think the pendulum has swung a little bit too far from a comics point of view. I think that we're a bit overly politically correct now, and I think it's destroying that sort of like larrikin streak that a lot of Aussies have, and I think it's impeding us saying what we really want to say, and glossing over topics and not even addressing some topics. And some people get offended even when you bring up topics. This is what comics are for. We're there to bring these topics up. Comedy isn't the problem. Comedy is the solution, mate. We need comics to be talking about all manner of things and airing the dirty linen and getting it out there. I'd rather know what someone is thinking. I'd rather know by hearing them say it rather than trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that you've had to deal with and respond to as a professional MC and host of large events, and where you're called upon to entertain and discuss issues in a way that brings light and laughter. I guess you've had to respond to that change, yeah?
Absolutely. Look, I can honestly say I haven't had to change too much. There are certain words I can't use now, but I've never got out of my way to offend anyone. I don't think any comic really does that. I mean, comics need to raise issues. Comics like to, and the prickliest issues are the best for comedy because you get a reaction, and people need to react to those things. The things that are hurting them in life or hurting them in society, these are the things that comics need to talk about, to make fun of. It makes you feel better about yourself, about these things. It allows you to deal with these things. So, but there are issues that people won't go anywhere near these days. And sometimes things need to be said aren't being said.
Yeah. Vince, it's not always a laughing matter, and which happened to be the name of your first film that you wrote, which was around global environmental sustainability back in 1991, and you won a prize in Berlin on the back of that film. Again, it was something that a lot of people wouldn't know was part of the CV you carry in your back pocket. What inspired you to write the film, and are those issues still relevant to you today?
Those issues are more relevant than ever, Peter. Look, this film was way ahead of its time. I mean, it wasn't my idea. I was approached as the talent to be in this film. I ended up being the co-writer of this film, and it was based on this document called the Brundtland Report, which the UN commissioned, which showed it was a really sort of long-term and early look at environmental sustainability. This is before a lot was known about global warming, although that was a big part of it as well. But it looked at a way of like putting natural assets on the government ledger, like trees, water, air. It identified a solution for dealing with all these problems by giving these things value and having them on an economic register, so that, for example, if you bought a Big Mac for $3.50, it should reflect the actual cost of chopping down that tree, clearing that forest, irrigating the pastures for the cows, and all those things would come, and that the price of that hamburger would then go to $500. And this was a way that they thought of evening out the way humanity consumed environmental assets. It was a really interesting report and way ahead of its time. And we shot this doco in Italy and France and India and parts of Australia. It's really fascinating. I play all 7 characters in this movie. I highly recommend it if you see it on YouTube. It was to think it was done that long ago, and it's such a relevant issue today.
And I read online, Vince, that when the casting was being done for those actors, for the 7 main characters, that you said that we should take the top 7 current actors going around right now, and it was you.
Yeah, go figure, eh?
And
I only got paid once.
That's
the problem, Peter. I only got paid once.
30 years on, you're a father. How do you feel about the issues you were talking about then that confront your kids now?
Yeah, well, look, that's never been more relevant than it is right today. I mean, given the world that we're handing over to these kids, and this pandemic really it's the biggest economic challenge of my life. And I've got a daughter who's about to graduate from high school, and we're looking at 5 years of getting out of this recession. I'm just thinking how lucky we were when we left school, or for most of my life, to be honest with you. I mean, the country's been recession-free for 30 consecutive years, nearly.
Yeah.
And my kids might see a very different Australia. I think they're well prepared for it. I think the education system that they're in is wonderful, and they're much more rounded than as people than I was. But look, I'm always concerned about them, mate. They are my kids. I want them to have a wonderful future, and of course the environment too, politics too. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns that they need to be confronted with over the next few years. So yeah, I'm worried about the kids.
Vince, you do a lot for a lot of different charities and causes, and as a professional MC and comic, that's the way you make your living. And we've been fortunate to have you at a number of the Hands events. And as I said, we've worked together corporately on a number of occasions. And one of the things I love about you and your family is that the commitment to the organisation and the cause doesn't begin when you walk on stage, and it doesn't end when you walk off stage. You've been to Bangkok and done some work over there, and you visited Kong Tui slums with Crew Petit, who's might be on the call today, and visited the work that we've done there. And what was the impact of that for you?
Well, first of all, mate, thank you for saying that. And Hands is lucky to have people like you, Peter. I mean, we can all see the effort you put in to this very good cause that you started all those years ago. And yes, we did visit that area, and I really wanted my kids to. My kids are very fortunate. Like, I've done very well in life, and my kids have had a charmed existence, and they live a very comfortable life. They go to very good schools that I'll never want for anything. Hopefully, things don't turn too ugly. I really need them to see the other side. I mean, I thought that was a great advantage in my upbringing. Having gone from sort of working class punch bowl, and I thought I was at a great advantage at university, because these people were all had come from fairly privileged backgrounds and had not seen what I'd seen, had not lived through what I'd lived through, and I always thought that was a very important aspect of my persona, and I really want my kids to have that as well. Life's too easy for them. So we made a point of taking them into these areas and seeing the schools and the setups there, and seeing some of the ugly sights. Seeing the rubbish and the filth and the poverty and the deprivation, and the assault on the senses. The sight and the smell and the sound. These things are really important for people to see.
And I think that, Vince, this is not, as you know, we haven't discussed this prior to this call now, so the questions aren't loaded. I don't know your answers, but walking through the slums with your family, did you feel threatened? Did you feel unsafe? Were you being asked for things? Were you asked for money? What was your experience in there with the people?
It was generally fairly pleasant. I mean, the great confrontation was just seeing how these people live. At no time did I feel under any physical threat. But look, it's probably. I'm speaking for myself. I'm sure my wife and kids might have felt a little bit sort of like, my God,
It's
why
intimidating.
here kind of thing. You know,
Yeah.
this is, I thought we were on holidays in Thailand, and
Yeah.
here we are, you know, seeing all this stuff. But I was generally uplifted at times too by what we saw. The schools, the kids singing, they made great efforts to sort of entertain us, and you know, my kids would join in. They're sort of like in their dances and little events too. I thought that was terrific. I really embraced the moment. It was a great experience.
Yeah, I've taken many people in there, and one of the overwhelming responses is the content that a lot of the Thais have and happy with their place in life. And it leaves an indelible impression, that's for sure.
I tell you what stands out the most is the smiles. And look, I had when we were shooting that film too that we were talking about earlier. We had to shoot in this. I think it was called the Dario slum. It was the biggest slum in Asia at the time. It was in Mumbai. I mean, just vast. I mean, a couple of million people living in there. I mean, it was just horrific. I mean, far worse than what we saw in Bangkok. I mean, it was literally like an open sewer, this place. It was, but the smiles on people, you know, particularly the young kids that would look up to you and give you a big toothy smile. It just, mate, it cuts you in half. It really does. There's the hope. The hope is the really uplifting part. The hope in their faces.
Vince, you've spent a career putting smiles on people's faces, and the industry in which you work has recognised that, and you've been awarded 5 Mo Awards. What does that mean to you?
Oh, mate, an award is an award. Seriously, I mean, they're probably, can you see them in the background there? They're just collecting dust, mate. They're just ornaments, mate. They don't mean anything. Seriously, they're one person's opinion of who they thought was doing a good job. Mate, there's no greater satisfaction in stand-up comedy than to stand on a stage in front of people and make them. Really, that's what really keeps me going. I mean, it's a great life. It's a great income. But the real kick in the pants is standing on a stage and making people laugh. And right now, with these social restrictions, it is killing me. Please, can we start letting people into a room, for God's sake? I mean, I'm doing a lot of stuff. We're streaming events, we're streaming shows, we're streaming award presentations and so forth, and it's just not the same. I mean, it looks really good, but the comedy, I'm not getting anything back. When I perform comedy, I might have like 3 people in the room. It's like talking to yourself. That ain't good. It's like playing tennis with yourself. It's not good. So give me back that joy, please.
The industry that you're in takes you to many different places. You work with many different audiences and clients. And what for you sits as the most memorable places and bizarre places that you've been? And what are the ones that you hope you never have to go back to?
Well, let me start with the good. My favourite show was, I did a show once for a guy in Sydney. It was his 50th birthday. And he ended up being this really big shot agent. And I'm just trying to think of his name now. But he managed Cher, Janet Jackson, Pink, Roger Davies is his name, lives in Sydney, and Tina Turner. And when I did his 50th, he snuck all these people into town and they all saw me do a show. Well, Tina Turner loved it so much that she flew me and my wife to her villa in the south of France to do her 50th anniversary in showbiz party. How's this for a gig, right? So, and I'd just gotten married. Like I was like 2 weeks married. And I've flown my wife to the French Riviera to do a show at Tina's house, you know. So she thought I was a fucking rock star. It hasn't happened, but she thought, how good is this, you know? And there's Giorgio Armani there, Bono was there, a Sting was there. It was just like this amazing part. And I was the feature act. She really wanted an Aussie at the show because Australia was a really big part of Tina's comeback. I mean, she had all those sort of domestic violence issues with her husband Ike, and it was all ugly. And you know, she was down and out, and you know, she was this Nutbush girl. That song is her life story. Nutbush was. You know, that was her punch bowl, if I can be so bold.
Yeah.
But she, Australia was a big part of her comeback. She had Roger Davies was her manager. She had the NRL campaign. She did the Thunderdome movie in Australia. Australia was part of her resurgence back to being this phenomenal international star. So she wanted an Aussie act at her big 50th anniversary thing, and that was me.
So you went from the French Riviera, and where do you go from there? How is it sit when you go home and go, babe, we're off to Bankstown Sports Club?
We're at the Punch Bowl RSL, yes. Nah, mate. It was. I'll never compare it too much to what I do generally. It was just such an extraordinary time. I mean, not all gigs are great, mate. There's some gigs that you reach into your pocket and you feel that money, thinking that's why I'm here, because my God, I wouldn't have any of these people at my house. It can be pretty frightening. But look, mate, generally, I absolutely love what I do. There's been a few disasters, of course. I mean, there's all sorts of things can go. I mean, I fell through a stage once, collapsed. You know, people started to laugh. And go, oh, he's funny. I've had people grab him by the throat on stage. People think it's part of the act. But people don't know how to react when you're a comic. You know, like, still to this day, like I drive into Channel 9 and the gatekeeper will say hello, and I go, oh, g'day, mate. You know, it's people have a real problem dealing with comics. They never know whether you're being serious or whether you're being funny. It's odd. It gets to you after a while. You tend to sort of. I can see why people like John Cleese really do sort of like become a bit introverted, because
sure,
sick of being judged. I mean, you can't interview a comedian and not expect them to be funny. I mean, someone tried to do some show once about they interviewed all these Aussie comedians and wanted to get to know them seriously and ask them some deep and profound questions. It was as boring as batshit. No one wanted to watch it because we only want to see you being funny. We don't care what you think.
So you've lived certainly a diverse career, and pre-COVID, you had a gig traveling the world for Hello World, and reporting from locations which, now understanding your passion for architecture, sounds like it's something you shouldn't have been paid for, Vince. I was absolutely on a winner with Hello World. I mean, that's come to a crashing halt as well. I was in some wonderful locations. I was kind of the European correspondent, so I got to go to France and Italy every year and eat amazing food and go to these beautiful, beautiful destinations. And some funny things would happen there actually too. There was we were in this villa in Tuscany, sitting on a balcony with this very aristocratic family. And you always have a translator, or a fixer, they call it, that does all the sort of prep work and liaises with the locals there. And she had a lot of problems pronouncing the word count. That's your imagination. But at one point she said to me, like everyone here is a count. And I said, oh, really? The area is full of counts. I said, you should see where I live. Oh, wonderful. So you're just hoping, I guess, like the rest of us, for COVID to end, lockdown to end, and you get back and do what you do and spend time with live audiences, yeah?
Look, I think this COVID time has really underlined what I absolutely love in life and how lucky I have been. I'm desperately missing travel. I'm desperately missing working on stage. I'm desperately missing the income that my wonderful life has provided for me. So, yeah, may it end quick, please, so we can get to, I hate hearing this word, the new normal, whatever that's going to be, but I hope it resembles the old normal, big time.
Yeah. And Vince, as I keep saying, we've worked together in many different forums, and I've always been in real admiration of how you manage to adapt for the different audience, whether it's a room full of insurance brokers, or whether it's families at charity dinners or so forth. And so there's real calling for people who have that ability. And I think Andrew Klein and yourself are just at the top of the tree. People listening to this, how do they find out more about you? How do they connect and they follow you and get in touch? Where are you these days online?
I'm really easy to find. I am vincesorrenti.com, and you can go there. You can contact me from there. You can see a bit of what I do there. So I'm out there, and look, dealing with different people is not a big deal, mate, because they're all people. They all have that one thing in common. So a lot of comics have a little bit of a fear of this of the event scene and mixing with people that they don't mix with every day. But the real beauty of it is they are people, and I've never had fear of a room full of insurance brokers or accountants or politicians or members of the clergy, whatever. People tend to laugh at the same things because they're human.
And I know our wonderful friends and family at NATA, with their members and suppliers in the retail industry, have done work with them, and they absolutely love you as well. So, Vince, we've got just over a minute to go. So I want you to cool down now, take a bit of a rest. You've done remarkable, and I'm sure everyone.
I must have dropped at least 3 or 4 calories in this
possibly
exchange.
Vince, if you're not out working next week and you've got some time on Friday, we'd love to have you back and let you share some more story.
I'd be delighted. What's next Friday? This is the 5th. It'll be yes, I'm available.
All right, then.
3 months? Yeah, I'm available.
All right, Vince. Well, have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for all you've done for Hands. Thanks for joining us today, and look forward to the chat next Friday.
Hey, thank you for everything you do, Peter. You're a trooper, mate. I'm just sitting here bludgeoned. You're the one riding the bike. So well done to you, and go hard, everyone, on that virtual bike ride right now. Enjoy the vision as we go under an overpass.
Good on you, Vince. Over to you, CT.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Vince. That was awesome, and I guess a very good insight into who you are, Vince, which was amazing, just hearing your backstory. It's not something you share every day as you're standing on stage as a comic. So yeah, thanks for sharing, and thanks, Pete, for diving into that story. So we are at the end of day 5, so Friday lunchtime session. We're coming to the end of the first week of the ride, which is it's just been amazing seeing everybody's Ks clocking up, and I think we're close to about 15,000 kilometres cycled as a group over the last 5 days, which is just phenomenal. So well done to you all, and yeah, just make sure you log your Ks on My Virtual Mission so that we can keep that going. Also, just on the fundraising, we are working through the fundraising goals for the next few weeks. So if you want to be in the running for the competition, make sure you send us your Facebook fundraiser, either via DM on Facebook or just send us an email at team@handsgroup, just so that we can add you to the tally, so that we can make sure you're in the running for that. So that's it from the Baines household today. It's been an absolute pleasure riding with you and sharing this with you over the last week. We look forward to, we'll be back here tomorrow with Dave Craniti from the Run Beyond project. And at lunchtime, we'll have Scott Stein connecting in with the kids and staff from Palmer House. So if you want to see some of the kids and have a bit of a ride with them tomorrow, then I recommend jumping on at 12 tomorrow. So that's all from us, and have a wonderful weekend. Have a great long weekend to those that have the long weekend, and we shall see you all tomorrow.
Body cup.